Hey guys, welcome back to GX Stories Sleeping. Tonight we journey somewhere muddy, loud, and entirely unfit for modern comfort. A medieval battlefield. Picture this. You blink awake to the distant clang of metal and the low hum of tension, only to realize you're lying in someone else's chainmail. It's damp, it smells, and you have absolutely no idea which direction your lungs are supposed to go next. You sit up, surrounded by thick morning fog and the sharp stench of horses, body odor, and something vaguely resembling burnt onions. Welcome to the 14th century. There's no coffee, no phone, and definitely no opt-out button. You're just another name scrawled in a noble's ledger, shoved into a war you don't understand, fighting for a cause that's explained to you roughly as God, king, or land, probably all three. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mud clings to your boots, or what's left of them. There are more holes than leather now. Around you, tired men and wide-eyed boys shift nervously, all wearing mismatched armor pieces handed out like raffle prizes. A dented helmet here, a rusting breastplate there. You, somehow, have inherited a nasal helm that smells suspiciously like cheese. No one talks much, except that one guy humming what must be a very out-of-tune war ballad. He's been humming it for hours. He also hasn't blinked. You make a mental note not to stand near him. Your captain, who is 23 but acts like he's seen everything, paces back and forth, barking orders in phrases you barely understand. He mentions something about flanks, wedges, and keeping formation, but it all blends together in a haze of nerves and early onset dehydration. The thing is, battles don't start like movies. There's no dramatic music, no heroic speech. Mostly it's waiting, and itching, and questioning whether you really should have joined this mess because someone promised free land at the tavern last month. Newsflash, that land probably doesn't exist. And even if it did, it's probably swampy and full of angry geese. But here's a mainstream historical fact. Most common soldiers like you were just levied peasants, summoned by local lords, expected to show up with whatever gear they could afford or borrow. No standardized training, no neat uniforms, just raw bodies to fill out the lines. According to modern historians, this led to more confusion than cohesion. Honestly, half the time, people didn't even know who they were supposed to stab. You hear distant hoofbeats. The nobility are arriving. Knights in full regalia. Atop war horses taller than most sheds, their armor shines in the sun. Yours, meanwhile, is covered in last night's stew. Maybe also yesterday's. You try not to think about it. One quirky little tidbit. Before battles, many soldiers rubbed onions or garlic on their blades. Some believed it poisoned wounds. Others just liked the smell. Either way, it does nothing to help your growing anxiety, or your sudden realization that the guy next to you is wearing his helmet backwards. There's a shout, muffled, panicked, and suddenly everyone's moving. Lines forming, weapons raised, shields wobbling. A blur of panic ripples through the crowd, like everyone just remembered they actually could die today. Someone behind you quietly throws up into a bucket. You're not sure where they got the bucket. A scholarly debate still swirls around whether medieval armies really stuck to those neat, clean formations we see in period dramas. Some records suggest chaos ruled more than command, with charges breaking apart in moments and soldiers defaulting to self-preservation. And as your captain yells something about advancing, you take your first real step forward, into a future painted in dirt, confusion, and the awful realization that no one here has brushed their teeth since spring. You take another step, and your armor clanks like a junk drawer full of cutlery. It's heavier than you imagined. Way heavier. Whoever designed this tin can clearly didn't factor in stairs, hills, or the basic need to breathe. The metal plates dig into your shoulders, pinch your thighs, and make your armpits feel like boiling cauldrons of regret. You try lifting your sword, not swinging it, just lifting it. It's not light. It's like waving around a steel crowbar, only your hands are already sore and you haven't even touched another human being in combat yet. You didn't think it'd be this hard. You assumed there'd be more posing and slow motion running, but here you are, wheezing like a bellows, while trying to adjust your chest plate that keeps sliding into your chin. This was supposed to make you feel powerful, invincible, but instead, the armor has turned you into a medieval turtle with mobility issues. You shuffle forward with the others, your joints clicking like a broken wind-up toy. Here's a mainstream historical fact. A full suit of 14th century plate armor could weigh between 40 to 60 pounds. And no, it wasn't like carrying a comfy backpack. That weight was distributed unevenly, and every movement cost energy. Even kneeling down could become an ordeal. If you fell, especially face first, you were relying on someone to help you back up. Otherwise, you just stayed there, like a sad, armored beetle. Now, while Hollywood loves the gleam and glory of these metal suits, real battlefields were often filled with a mix of armor types. You might be wearing chainmail with some plate bits, or just a padded gambeson if you were unlucky, and you're probably unlucky. And guess what? Chainmail, though iconic, doesn't stop blunt force very well. Sure, it might keep a blade from slicing through your belly, but the force behind the hit could still crack ribs, snap collarbones, or knock the wind, and maybe the will to live, right out of you. You'd survive, maybe, but only long enough to suffer. Quirky tidbit incoming. Medieval padding under the armor, called an arming doublet or gambeson, was sometimes stuffed with everything from horsehair to old rags to bits of moss. It didn't matter how fancy it looked. If it absorbed sweat and didn't stink too badly, it was good enough. Some soldiers even reused older family armor, altering it to fit with belts and cords, which is how you end up with a breastplate 2 sizes too small, and thigh guards that jingle like sleigh bells. The armor's metal heats up quickly. Within an hour of marching, your back is soaked, your feet are blistering, and your helmet is slowly cooking your forehead like an overripe tomato left in the sun. You think about taking it off, but then remember that sharp things are coming your way soon. Very sharp things. There's a scholarly debate among historians about just how mobile knights and foot soldiers really were in armor. Some claim they could run, jump, even cartwheel. Well, maybe not that one. Others argue that most movement was slow, stiff, and exhausting, especially for poorly trained levies like you. And then it hits you, literally. A rock, tossed from who knows where. It bounces off your shoulder plate and rattles you down to your spine. It doesn't pierce anything, but it stings. A lot. And it reminds you just how badly this day is about to go. The captain yells again. You raise your sword awkwardly. Your elbow screams. Someone ahead of you falls. And still, you trudge forward, sweating in armor that's slowly trying to smother you from the inside out. It's only been 20 minutes, and you're already dreaming of a bath, a feathered pillow, and maybe, just maybe, a world where fashion armor is made of cotton. You're starving. Absolutely. Bone deep, hollow inside kind of starving. And to make things worse, breakfast, if you can even call it that, was a piece of stale rye bread so hard it could double as a weapon. There was also a turnip. You don't even like turnips, especially not when they arrive covered in dirt and possibly a worm or two. You picked the worm off, probably, but that was hours ago. And the problem with medieval warfare, aside from the screaming and the occasional dismemberment, is the tragic lack of snack breaks. There are no protein bars tucked into your belt, no trail mix in your helmet, just a growing ache in your gut and a vague memory of what cheese used to taste like. Mainstream historical fact, medieval armies were famously underfed. Campaign logistics were at best a chaotic gamble. Soldiers were often left to forage for themselves, steal from locals, or eat whatever the camp cook could throw into a pot. Spoiled meat? Sure. Pigeon stew? Lucky? Flat beer? Almost a delicacy. Sanitary? Not even close. You eye the man next to you. He's chewing something. It's gray. Possibly meat, possibly not. You don't ask. Food preservation, after all, wasn't exactly medieval Europe's strong suit. Salted pork was common, but expensive. Dried peas, lentils, and black bread made up much of a soldier's diet, when available. If not, there was always the option of chewing boiled leather. Yes, really. It was a thing. In a pinch, people have even eaten their own bootstraps, softened with water and hope. Now, there's a quirky little footnote in the historical pantry. Some soldiers believed garlic made you stronger in battle. Not just healthy, stronger. Whole cloves were chewed before combat for courage and to ward off death. More likely, they just warded off everyone around you. You try to imagine the breath cloud forming inside your helmet. Suddenly, death seems merciful. Your stomach growls so loudly it startles the pigeon that had been watching you from a fence post. It flaps off, probably in search of better-fed people. You trudge forward, half delirious. Your head is light, your limbs lag like wet noodles, and you start to think about random food that doesn't exist yet. Pizza, burgers, French fries. You don't know what those things are, but your imagination fills them in like dreams. Someone mutters about roasting a squirrel. You're not even grossed out. You're intrigued. Here's something fun. Historians still debate just how much access to food common foot soldiers actually had. While nobles usually had tents and servants to cook for them, peasants often shared whatever they could scrape together. Some chronicles describe entire armies slowed by lack of food, more men dying of hunger or disease than enemy blades. And still, they marched. Your hands shake slightly. You can't tell if it's fear or the lack of calories or both. Your helmet feels heavier by the minute. You're sweating, but shivering. The guy behind you slips you half a piece of dried apple. It's brown. It tastes like regret. But you whisper a thank you anyway. You miss home. Even if home was a thatched hut with a straw mattress and a goat who kept eating your shoes. At least there, you had porridge. Your stomach growls again. Someone tells it to shut up. You glare at them through the slit in your visor and consider eating their boot. You raise your sword, or you try to. Your fingers, slick with sweat, barely grip the hilt. Your arm wobbles, elbow locked at a nervous angle, like you're trying to wave at someone far away and might cry at the same time. The blade itself feels wildly unfamiliar, like a tool from someone else's nightmare. Sharp, yes, but also weirdly heavy, and far less cooperative than Hollywood ever led you to believe. Now here comes the big shock. Swinging a sword? Not glamorous, not precise, not even remotely easy. You thought you'd be slashing clean arcs like a warrior poet. Instead, you're just flailing, awkward, off balance, and hoping you don't drop the thing onto your own foot. Your first attempt at a swing is underwhelming. You sort of half swat the air, hitting absolutely nothing and nearly spinning yourself in a circle. Someone behind you chuckles, someone ahead of you bleeds. You're not entirely sure you're helping. Mainstream historical fact: swords were not the go-to weapon for most soldiers. They were expensive, sometimes symbolic. A wealthy man's sidearm. More common were spears, axes, or polearms. Longer weapons that gave you reach without needing fencing lessons. And even then, combat was chaotic, bloody, desperate. There was no elegant choreography, just survival and luck. The guy next to you is better at this. He's gripping a poleaxe with surprising confidence, swinging it in rough, brutal arcs. You, meanwhile, are locked in a tense standoff with a guy who looks like he used to wrestle bears recreationally. He has a spiked club. You have a sudden need to use the bathroom. You manage a clumsy block and feel the vibration rattle down your entire arm. Your shoulder screams. Your wrist folds. And the guy doesn't stop. He comes at you again. And now you're just trying not to die in the least embarrassing way possible. You backpedal, trip on something, probably a helmet, and fall backward into the muck. For a moment, you can't move. Your sword is gone. Your pride is somewhere under your left boot, and the guy who just hit you has already moved on, bored, chasing someone else who looks slightly more edible. Quirky tidbit: some medieval duels and battlefield engagements were so clumsy that onlookers recorded them with morbid amusement. Chroniclers described knights toppling over and stuck in ditches, or too exhausted to lift their swords, just slapping each other with shields until someone gave up. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether the average peasant-turned-soldier had any formal training at all. While some regions had a size of arms, laws requiring men to train and equip themselves, most just didn't. Swinging a sword wasn't an innate skill. It took practice. But you spent your youth herding geese, not fencing. A trumpet blares. Someone yells to regroup. You get yanked up by the elbow by a man whose face is obscured by a dented visor. He doesn't speak. He just shoves your sword back into your hands and runs off. You stare at the weapon, then at your trembling hands, and wonder if it's too late to switch careers to, say, village beekeeper. The battle rages around you. Shouts, crashes, the awful wet thunk of metal meeting meat. And you try again. 1 swing, 2. You're not aiming, you're flailing. But this time, you connect with something. It might have been a shield, might have been a tree. Doesn't matter. The blade bounces, your wrist aches, but you're still standing. Barely. Welcome to your first taste of medieval melee combat. Spoiler alert, you're going to need a lot more dried apple slices. Your arm throbs. Your breath rattles in your throat, and then you feel it. That sharp sting slicing across your thigh. Not deep, but enough to drop you to one knee. You look down and see a thin line of blood already mixing with the mud. You're not dead, but you're very much not fine. You hobble back behind a splintered cart and slump against the wooden wheel. There's shouting in the distance. Maybe your captain, maybe someone else who outranks you in both authority and number of working limbs. Either way, they're not helping you right now. A man stumbles over to you. He's carrying a leather satchel that smells like vinegar and old sheep. His apron is red, though whether it started out that color, you don't know. He says something about holding still, then pulls out what looks like a bone saw. You ask if he's a doctor. He grins. "I'm your barber," he says. Mainstream historical fact. Most battlefield medics in the Middle Ages weren't doctors, as we define them today. They were barbers, monks, or sometimes just the guy with the strongest stomach. Medical knowledge was rudimentary, and most of it revolved around balancing the body's 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which is another way of saying, we have no idea what we're doing, but we're gonna bleed you anyway. He doesn't amputate, thankfully. Your wound isn't that bad, but he does pour something on it that sizzles like bacon in a hot pan. You scream. He nods approvingly, like pain is a sign that it's working. Quirky tidbit, battlefield treatments sometimes included applying moss, cobwebs, or even moldy bread to wounds. Why? Some of it had mild antiseptic properties. Most of it just seemed like a good idea at the time. And yes, wine was a popular antiseptic. Not because it was effective, necessarily, but because it was there. And after the 3rd swig, you didn't care anymore. You're handed a rag soaked in something that smells like fermented pears and sadness. "Bite down," the barber says, and starts stitching your leg with thread that might have once belonged to a fishing net. You try not to look. You fail. There's a scholarly debate over how often battlefield surgery actually saved lives. Some argue that the crude methods led to rampant infection, while others note that survival rates were surprisingly decent, especially if the wound didn't hit bone or major organs. But everyone agrees. If infection set in, your odds dropped like a rock off a castle wall. You stagger to your feet, leg bandaged and stiff. The barber gives you a nod, wipes his hands on his apron, which somehow becomes more red, and walks away humming something that sounds suspiciously like a tavern song about pickled fish. You try to rejoin the line, but everything spins. Your head is a carnival of aches. You catch yourself against a tree and lean there for a moment, just breathing, just hoping. A man nearby vomits into his helmet. He does not look surprised. He just puts it back on and keeps going. This is medieval healing. Part prayer, part alcohol, and a whole lot of guesswork. No sterile gloves, no anesthesia. Just grit, groaning, and the hope that the rats don't get to you first. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will scribble your name down in a ledger somewhere. One more soul, patched and barely breathing, ready to be thrown back into the mud. You press forward, wobbling slightly, with your makeshift stitches tugging at your skin, and your confidence hanging on by a frayed piece of wool. The sun dips behind a smear of gray clouds, and the battlefield shifts into something colder, quieter, and somehow more menacing. You're told to rest. Sleep, if you can, the captain mutters, his voice dry and cracked like an old saddle. You want to laugh, but your ribs hurt too much. There's no tent for you. You find a bare patch of ground, mostly dry, slightly less trampled than the rest, and collapse onto it like a sack of potatoes with joint pain. The earth is hard, your armor digs into every part of your body, and your helmet serves as a pillow about as well as a soup bowl. You close your eyes, open them again. The sky above you is too bright, or maybe your brain is. You're tired, but your thoughts keep replaying every near-death moment from earlier like a particularly stressful bedtime story. Mainstream historical fact: soldiers in medieval campaigns rarely had comfortable sleeping arrangements. There were no tents unless you were nobility. The average foot soldier slept under the stars, in the mud, or huddled near campfires, if there was any fuel to burn. Bedding consisted of whatever you carried, which was usually nothing. Next to you, someone's snoring, loudly. Another guy's coughing, a deep, rattling sound that probably means he's either sick or storing some kind of bird inside his lungs. Someone down the line is softly crying. You don't blame him. The camp smells like damp wool, unwashed feet, and something that might be a dead horse. Your nose gets used to it. Sort of. You roll onto your side, which makes your armor pinch in at least 4 new places. Quirky tidbit: rats were a constant in military camps. Not just the sneaky kind, bold rats. Rats that would steal food from your hand if you didn't look menacing enough. They'd chew through packs, climb into boots, and sometimes curl up on your chest while you slept. It was almost sweet. Until they bit you. You try not to think about the rats. Someone lights a fire. Its flicker dances across rusted helmets and tired eyes. A few soldiers pass around a flask. You get a sip. It tastes like apples and old rope. You savor it anyway. It's the only warm thing you've had in days. There's a scholarly debate about how effective night camps were at maintaining troop morale. Some historians argue they were essential for camaraderie, sharing stories, mending wounds, remembering why they fought. Others insist they were cesspools of disease, depression, and desertion. After all, it's easy to believe in honor and glory when the sun's out. At night, it's mostly just blisters and regret. You finally drift into something resembling sleep, but it's not restful. Your dreams are strange, filled with clanking, distant screams, and a sheep wearing armor asking you to polish its hooves. You wake up with a start, heart pounding, unsure if it's morning or if someone just stepped on your head. Turns out it's both. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, tongue dry. The fog hasn't lifted, and neither has your sense of dread. Another day of marching, bleeding, pretending to be braver than you are. The man next to you offers a crust of bread. You take it. You don't ask where he got it. You strap your gear back on, every buckle feeling heavier than before. The sun rises over the ridge, painting everything gold and gray. You breathe deep and instantly regret it, because the coughing guy is now very close and very contagious. Another battle is coming. You can feel it in your spine, but first you'll spend the morning limping, because in medieval warfare, sleep is more of a rumor than a reality. You've just managed to strap your helmet back on when it happens. The air changes. It stiffens. People freeze like a single breath has passed through the ranks. Then a faint whistling sound cuts the morning haze. You barely have time to react before a wooden shaft slams into the dirt, a foot from your boot. Arrows. A lot of them. One buries itself into someone's shield. Another thuds into the chest of a man behind you, who lets out a short, surprised grunt before crumpling. You crouch reflexively, eyes darting skyward, and sure enough, the sky has changed. No longer just gray, but peppered with tiny, fast-moving shapes. They rain down like angry birds with trust issues. Mainstream historical fact: medieval battles often began, or ended, under a hailstorm of arrows. English longbowmen were especially feared, capable of releasing 10 to 12 arrows per minute with devastating force. These weren't neat, single-shot duels. They were chaotic. Massed volleys meant to disrupt, confuse, and kill en masse. You try to raise your shield, but it feels too small. Too late. One arrow thunks off your shoulder plate with a sound that's far too close to your ear. You wonder if it's lodged there. It's not. Yet, there's shouting. Someone screaming for the archers to be found. Others yelling to form a shield wall. But most men are just ducking, running, or praying. Some do all three at once. You try to stay low, but low doesn't mean safe. Arrows bounce off rocks, skip across the ground, and punch through weak spots in armor like needles through cloth. You've never realized how many gaps your armor has until now. Quirky little tidbit: some soldiers believed goose fat rubbed into armor helped arrows slide off more easily. Others tried to bless their mail with charms or herbs. One particularly odd method involved tying a dead frog to your chest. You have no frog. You do, however, have a fresh blister and a helmet that now smells like fear. You crawl behind a fallen cart and take a moment to breathe. Someone else is already there, crouched and shaking, with a feathered shaft poking out of his thigh like a grotesque party favor. He looks at you, wide-eyed, and mutters something about his mother. You nod. Seems appropriate. There's a scholarly debate over how effective arrow storms truly were. Some say they were more psychological than lethal, designed to disrupt formations. Others point to mass casualties, especially in unarmored troops. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Either way, it's terrifying to experience. Suddenly, a horn blares. Your captain emerges, arm raised, trying to rally the men. He's bleeding from the temple, but yelling with conviction, which earns him at least partial credibility. You rise to follow, legs shaking. Another volley comes. You duck again. The guy next to you doesn't. He drops, soundlessly. You clench your teeth and run. Your boots slip in the mud. Arrows slice through the air, close enough to hear the fletching flutter. You try not to think. Just move. Shield up. Head down. Don't stop. Don't trip. Definitely don't scream. By the time the arrows stop, you are soaked in sweat, your arms ache, and your legs feel like boiled turnips. The battlefield is littered with spent shafts and sprawled bodies. Some are dead, some are groaning, some are pretending not to be either. You press your back to a tree, panting, your heart still hammering against your ribs. You survived the volley, barely, and you realize now, it wasn't personal. Arrows don't care who you are. They don't check your rank or your dreams. They just fall, fast and sharp, with one simple goal, reminding you that in a medieval battle, your survival is mostly just luck, bad aim, or someone else standing slightly closer to danger. You stumble over a shattered shield, barely keeping your balance. The ground beneath your feet squishes in a way that makes your stomach turn. It's not just mud. You try not to think about it. Instead, you focus on breathing. In, out. Try to ignore the fact that it smells like wet wool, sour milk, and death. Then your stomach lurches again. Not from fear this time, but from something deeper. Your gut twists painfully, and you feel that unmistakable rumble of gastrointestinal betrayal. You clench, hard, praying to every saint you can remember. But it's no use. You sprint toward the edge of the encampment like a man possessed, armor clanking, dignity fleeing with every step. You dive behind a bush and, well, let's just say medieval sanitation was never your strong suit to begin with. Mainstream historical fact: disease killed far more soldiers than combat ever did. Dysentery, typhoid, and various poxes ravaged armies on the march. Poor sanitation, contaminated water, spoiled rations, all perfect ingredients for an army-wide epidemic. In some campaigns, entire divisions were lost before ever seeing a battlefield. You wipe your brow, shivering, still squatting, and wondering if this is how you die. Not in glorious combat, not defending your homeland, but behind a shrub with your pants around your ankles and an upset stomach that's winning the war. Back in camp, the coughing hasn't stopped. In fact, it's spreading. Some men lie curled in blankets, faces pale and slick with sweat. Others just lie still. You've heard whispers, fever sickness, the bad air, or camp plague, as some call it. Everyone has a different name for it, but none of them offer a cure. One man swears it's the meat. Another blames the water. A third insists it's the rat he saw last night, the one chewing on someone's bread before darting back into the shadows. Honestly, they're probably all right. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval soldiers wore amulets filled with herbs or dried flowers, believing they could ward off illness. Lavender, rosemary, even garlic were popular choices, stuffed into pouches and worn like armor for your nose. Did they help? Not really, but at least it made the stench more tolerable. You shuffle back to your gear, weaker now, with a cold sweat dripping down your spine. The sun feels too hot, the shadows too cold. You sit heavily on a rock and try to drink some water. only to find it tastes like rust and mildew, probably drawn from the same stream the horses were bathing in. There's a scholarly debate about how widespread camp hygiene knowledge truly was. Some argue medieval commanders did try to implement waste zones and washing stations, but that soldiers ignored them. Others suggest no one really understood the connection between filth and disease. It was just accepted as part of the job. Either way, the results were the same. A lot of very sick men, trying to pretend they weren't dying. The guy next to you has developed a hacking cough that sounds like he's trying to dislodge an entire pine cone from his chest. You inch away, slowly. You look around and realize the enemy doesn't even need to charge. If they wait long enough, half your unit will be gone from something they can't even see. You wonder again, why are you here? Why did you come? For glory? For a promise of land? For some lord you'll never meet, and who definitely doesn't know your name. You lie back in the dirt, hand on your queasy stomach, and close your eyes. Forget swords and arrows. It's the puddle water and unwashed hands that'll get you. You wake up to shouting, not the battle kind. This shouting is angry, tired, and a little too theatrical for someone who hasn't bathed in 3 weeks. Your captain is yelling at a group of men who were caught trying to sneak away before dawn. One of them swears he wasn't deserting, just looking for mushrooms. Right, in full armor, with his spear and backpack. Morale is hanging on by a thread, and that thread was probably chewed through by rats last night. You pull yourself up and join the others in the half-hearted circle around the captain. His speech is the usual. Honor, duty, loyalty to your liege. You look around at the tired, bruised, underfed soldiers nodding along and wonder if any of them actually know who their liege is. The guy next to you thinks it's the local blacksmith. He might not be wrong. Mainstream historical fact. The average medieval soldier had little personal loyalty to distant kings or feudal lords. Many fought because they were ordered to. Others joined for pay, meager as it was, or out of obligation. Feudal levies, common across Europe, required peasants to fight for a certain number of days per year. Refusal could mean losing your land, or worse. You try to picture the nobleman who sent you here. Maybe he's relaxing in a fine tent, sipping watered wine, nibbling cheese with fewer worms than yours had. Does he even know the mud smells like dead eels after it rains? Probably not. He likely has dry socks. Around you, conversations grow darker. We'll all be bones by next week. They say the enemy has crossbows that can pierce a knight's chest. I heard they bring dogs that eat the wounded. You want to dismiss it all as nonsense, but at this point, even the dogs sound believable. Quirky tidbit, some medieval armies did employ war dogs. Mastiffs and other large breeds were trained to charge into battle, guard camps, or chase down deserters. Their armor looked intimidating. Their barks probably terrified even the bravest bladder. Someone hands you a piece of boiled barley. It tastes like old socks, but you eat it anyway. You try to think of something hopeful, but all that comes to mind is how warm your bed back home used to be, even if it smelled like goat. There's a scholarly debate over just how effective feudal levies were compared to professional standing armies. Some say the passionless, undertrained nature of these troops made them liabilities in prolonged conflict. Others argue they were just good enough when fighting other groups of equally miserable conscripts. You look down at your boots. They're soggy. Again. One of them is coming apart at the sole, flapping slightly as you walk. You consider tying it with twine. You consider giving up. Then someone starts singing. A low, wordless hum at first, but it catches on. A sad little tune. Not quite hopeful, not quite defeated. Just there. Something to fill the air that isn't groaning or vomiting or another death rattle. You hum along because it's either that or sob openly. You wonder if the enemy soldiers are humming too across the hill. Maybe they're just as tired. Maybe they're also missing their dogs and dreaming of dry socks. But for now, you stand in the muck, clutching your weapon like it's a lifeline, pretending the song makes you feel something other than hollow. Because in the medieval battlefield, morale doesn't march, it limps. And today, it's barely crawling. The morning fog lingers as you're told to march. Again, no battle yet, just endless walking. You shift your shield from one arm to the other, trying to stave off the burning ache in your shoulders. Your armor clinks, your feet squelch, and every step reminds you that medieval warfare is less about glorious combat and more about really unfortunate cardio. You trudge through fields, mud, shallow rivers, and what might have been a road 6 months ago. You pass burned out huts, the occasional broken cart, and trees marked with crude symbols you can't decipher. Everything blurs together: gray skies, greenish mud, and brownish food, if it even qualifies as food. Mainstream historical fact: most of a medieval soldier's time wasn't spent fighting, but marching. Campaigns often covered dozens of miles on foot, in rough weather, while carrying all their gear, sometimes upwards of 60 pounds. Add a poorly fitted helmet and old leather shoes, and you're a blister with the legs. There's no music to march to, just the clomp of boots and the occasional grunt or curse. You pass a stream and think about bathing, but you're warned not to. Too cold, someone says, and you'll catch something worse than the lice. Speaking of lice, yes, you have them. Everyone does. You try not to scratch. It's a full body itch that never ends. Like your skin is wearing its own set of armor, forged in irritation. Some men shave their heads to stop the infestation. You consider it. Then remember you don't have a mirror or a razor. Or time. Quirky tidbit: soldiers sometimes spread animal fat over their skin to keep lice from biting. It didn't work, but it did make you slippery, so maybe harder to grab in battle? That's the level of logic you're working with. You pass a village that's long since emptied. Chickens roam freely. A goat eyes your group with suspicion, clearly unconvinced by your military prowess. Children peek from behind shutters, thin, wary, quiet. You don't blame them. You probably look more like ghosts than heroes. There's a scholarly debate over how often these forced marches contributed to the overall failure of campaigns. Some argue the wear and tear from days, or weeks, of marching left armies too fatigued to fight effectively. Others say the movement itself was a tactic: intimidation, repositioning, or cutting off supply routes. You say it just sucks. Your boots are soaked. Again, one of your toenails feels like it's about to detach and form its own nation. Your thighs chafe from all the friction under chainmail. Every time you shift your gear, a new muscle complains. You try to distract yourself by counting birds. You see exactly 4. 2 of them might not even be birds. You also try reciting prayers you learned as a child, but halfway through the second line, you forget the words and start humming that same sad tune from the camp. A man ahead of you collapses. No one panics. No one screams. 2 others lift him by the arms and carry him along. You hear someone mutter, "Third one today." You walk a little slower, hoping you're not number 4. You finally stop just before sundown. Your legs feel like wet straw. You sink to the ground and peel off your boots. The smell is impressive, possibly a war crime. You air out your socks, both of them different colors, neither of them dry, and consider eating a handful of dried lentils for dinner. Marching isn't the glorious image you had of war. There are no banners waving, no fanfare, just mud, sores, and a sunset that's both beautiful and completely wasted on your exhausted brain. You lie back on your shield and close your eyes. If nothing else, at least you're not walking. For now. You wake up to pain. Not the sharp kind from an arrow or blade, but the dull, persistent ache of a body that's been used like a poorly maintained wheelbarrow. Your back feels like someone dropped a barrel of bricks on it. Your knees don't want to cooperate. Your shoulders have decided to go on strike, but there's no time to negotiate with your joints. The captain's barking orders again. Your company is moving. And not just marching. This time, it's a siege. You're herded toward a looming stone fortress on a distant hill. It looks almost peaceful in the distance. Quiet, even serene. That changes quickly as you get closer and realize the defenders are not in the mood to surrender. Arrows whistle down from the battlements. Rocks. Hot oil. Maybe soup. You're not entirely sure, but it scalds. And you yelp like a kicked dog. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval sieges were long, brutal, and rarely as exciting as films make them seem. Most involved months of starving the enemy out. But when an assault did happen, it was hell. Scaling ladders under a rain of projectiles, trying to breach thick stone walls with battering rams, or tunneling underneath to collapse the foundations. None of which, unfortunately, involves just yelling loudly and charging through the front gate. Today, you've been assigned to the ram team. It sounds cooler than it is. You and a group of equally nervous soldiers gather behind a thick wooden log, reinforced with iron. The idea is simple. Run up to the enemy gate and bash it until it breaks. The reality? You are slow, clumsy, and highly flammable. You crouch under a makeshift wooden roof designed to protect you from above. Spoiler, it doesn't work. A rock slams into the edge of the cover, splintering the frame. Someone screams. Someone else yells, "Keep going." Like, that's helpful. You run anyway. Quirky tidbit: some siege engines were decorated with animal heads. Not for intimidation, but because someone believed it brought luck. One infamous battering ram in France was named the Goat, and was blessed with holy water before every push. Your ram has no name, probably because it's already on fire. The gate looms ahead. Arrows thud into the wooden roof above you. Smoke swirls around as pitch and tar rain down. Your hands slip on the ram's handles. You lurch forward, slamming it into the gate. The impact rattles your teeth. Again. Slam. Again. Slam. The wood creaks but doesn't crack. Someone up top dumps a bucket of something steaming down the middle of the group. You're too busy screaming to figure out what it was. There's a scholarly debate about how often gates actually failed under battering rams. Many were reinforced from the inside. Some were built in curves to deflect force. The real damage often came from undermining walls or lighting the doors on fire. But right now, you're just hoping the door breaks before your arms do. Another slam. Your shoulders scream. Someone drops beside you, groaning. Someone else takes their place. You keep pushing. Eventually, a trumpet blares behind you. A retreat signal. You fall backward and crawl away from the ram like it personally betrayed you. Your arms are jelly. Your face is coated in ash and fear. Your boots are smoking, and the gate still standing. You collapse behind a stack of barrels and stare at the sky. Your ears ring. Your lungs burn. You're pretty sure part of your left eyebrow is missing. Siege combat, it turns out, is just as miserable as everything else. And now they're telling you to prepare for another run. This time, you're not on the ram. You're on the ladder crew. Hooray! You grip a long wooden ladder, splintered and heavy, and stare up at the fortress wall that looms like a mountain made of bad decisions. At the top, shadows move. Archers, defenders, possibly someone boiling cabbage. You can't be sure. What you do know is that they're ready, and you are not. "On my mark!" the captain shouts. You move forward with the others, lugging the ladder through mud and rubble. Every step feels like a gamble. Arrows rain down, thudding into the ground, into shields, into people. A man next to you jerks violently and collapses. You don't stop. You can't. You reach the wall. Somehow, you and another soldier hoist the ladder upright. It wobbles like a drunk tree. The top barely reaches the crenellations, and it's at a steep enough angle to make your stomach try to crawl out of your throat. You hesitate. Then someone shouts, "Climb." Mainstream historical fact. Scaling walls during a siege was one of the most dangerous tasks in medieval warfare. Defenders would push ladders away, drop rocks, pour boiling water, or fire directly down onto climbers, who were totally exposed. It was less storming the castle and more ascending the world's deadliest staircase. You grip the rungs and start climbing. Every inch feels like a betrayal. Your arms scream, your thighs burn. Someone climbs below you, jostling your feet. Someone falls off the ladder next to you. You try not to look down. At the top, a helmeted face appears. He doesn't hesitate, just slams a club into your shoulder. You lose your grip, cry out, and somehow cling to the ladder with your knees. Elegant? No. Effective? Barely. You recover, swing your sword upward in blind desperation, and feel it glance off metal. You're not sure if you hit a man or a wall. You scramble the last few feet, pull yourself onto the ledge, and immediately regret it. You're outnumbered, you're winded, and you've never felt more like a lost tourist in the world's angriest castle. Quirky tidbit. Some siege defenders use beehives as weapons. Yes, actual beehives. Tossed or lowered onto attackers, these living grenades cause chaos and panic. There's even an account of someone using live snakes in clay pots. You can only assume these were very bad days for everyone involved, including the bees. You raise your shield just in time to block a downward blow. Your legs are shaky, your vision narrows. You swing, you dodge, you flail. A defender lunges and then gets knocked aside by another attacker who's just made it up the ladder behind you. For a moment, you breathe. There's a scholarly debate about how often scaling walls actually succeeded. Some historians suggest that the success rate was incredibly low, and these charges were mostly distractions. Others believe that sheer numbers sometimes worked, flood the wall with bodies, and eventually some would stick. You're really hoping you're one of the sticky ones. You manage to take a few steps forward, sword up, then a horn sounds, the signal to retreat. Again, you want to cry, you really do. But crying takes energy, and you're running low. You turn and see the ladder swaying beneath you, half the rungs now broken or slick with blood. The climb down might be even worse than up. You nearly slip twice, and by the time your boots touch the mud again, you're shaking so badly you can't tell if you're injured or just scared. Someone pats your shoulder. "You didn't die," he says. You nod. You didn't. But your soul might have taken a few bruises. You slump behind a fallen cart and try to stretch your arms, which no longer feel like part of your body. The ladder crew gathers nearby, eyes wide, breath shallow. You all look like wet cats that barely survived the bath. They say siege warfare is a game of patience. At this point, it feels more like a game of how long before we all disintegrate. Night falls again, and with it comes the rain. Not a gentle drizzle, a full, soaking, soul-destroying downpour. Your cloak is already damp from yesterday. Your boots squelch when you walk. Your hair clings to your face and your armor squeaks in a way that is neither intimidating nor majestic. You try to find shelter under what's left of a wagon, but 5 others had the same idea. You all huddle together like sheep with trust issues, shivering and pretending you don't mind the puddle forming around your ankles. Someone sneezes. Someone else coughs. You give up on staying dry and let the water wash over you, because really, what's one more misery in the grand buffet of medieval suffering? Mainstream historical fact: rain was a constant enemy in medieval campaigns, not just because it made you wet, but because it destroyed roads, swamped siege weapons, soaked supplies, and turned battlefields into slick, deadly messes. Archers couldn't keep their bows dry. Tents collapsed. Food spoiled faster. Illness spread like gossip in a tavern. You glance toward the siege tower, now leaning precariously in the mud like a drunken cow. A soldier mutters that it's cursed. Someone else says it was built on the wrong side of the moon. No one corrects them. It's easier to believe in curses than poor carpentry. You try to sleep. You can't. The ground is lumpy and sharp. Your cloak sticks to your skin. Somewhere nearby, a man is softly singing a lullaby in a language you don't understand. It helps. A little. Quirky tidbit: some medieval armies believed that tying bits of cloth from saints' robes to siege engines would protect them from the weather. Others carried tiny statues or relics and whispered prayers into the wind. There's no proof it worked, but the alternative, not doing it and watching your equipment sink, seemed worse. Your stomach growls again. Dinner was a handful of barley and a piece of something described only as meat. You're pretty sure it was shoe leather seasoned with regret. You chew anyway because hunger doesn't care about flavor. You think of home, of warm bread and dry socks, and maybe even a clean blanket. You picture your little hut, the one with the leaky roof and the goat that hated everyone except you. You'd give anything to be there, even if it meant scrubbing floors or chasing chickens all day. There's a scholarly debate over how well medieval commanders prepared for weather during campaigns. Some historians claim they factored it into strategy, timing sieges for dry seasons, fortifying camps. Others believe it was mostly trial, error, and luck. Judging by your current state, wet, cold, and chewing a questionable meal, you're leaning toward error. The rain doesn't stop, it just gets colder. You curl into yourself, trying to keep your fingers from going numb. You hear someone vomiting, someone else whispering prayers, and someone, bizarrely, humming a tavern tune about cheese and betrayal. It helps, strangely. You finally drift into a shallow, twitchy sleep. In your dreams, you're running, not from battle, but from mud that swallows your legs and pulls you into the earth. When you wake, you half expect to be underground, but no, just face down in a puddle, your cloak stuck to your cheek, and the very real sensation of a worm crawling past your nose. You sit up, groaning, sore in places you didn't know could ache. The The rain is still falling, but softer now. The dawn is trying to break through a wall of clouds, and somewhere, a rooster crows like it's not the most cursed place in the world. You stand, slowly, joints crack, feet squish, and armor clinks. Another day at war. Another day pretending this is normal. Your orders today are deceptively simple. Dig. Not fight, not climb, not march. Just dig. You're handed a shovel with a splintered handle and pointed toward the edge of camp, where a trench is being carved into the earth like a scar. Digging sounds easy until you're halfway through your first scoop and realize the ground is mostly rock, root, and something suspiciously bone-like. You're not sure if it's animal or not. You keep digging anyway. Mainstream historical fact. Trenches and ditches were a major part of medieval siege warfare, used to protect troops, disrupt cavalry charges, and channel enemies into kill zones. In some cases, entire networks of earthworks were constructed around castles, turning battlefields into muddy obstacle courses. The shovel blisters your hands almost immediately. Your back starts to protest around the 5th scoop. By the 10th, your spine is filing an official complaint. A man next to you leans on his tool, sweating buckets, and mutters, "This isn't what I signed up for." You nod, not entirely sure what you signed up for anymore. You toss another shovelful of dirt, and it splashes onto your boots, already coated in a thick paste of mud and sorrow. The wind picks up and throws dust into your face, as if the weather itself wants to remind you who's in charge. You pause to take a drink from your canteen. It tastes like warm pennies. Probably safer than the stream water, though that's not saying much. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, soldiers were actually paid not in coin, but in salt or bread during prolonged campaigns. It was practical, but deeply demoralizing, especially when your salary molded before payday. There's an old joke that a soldier once traded his sword for a decent loaf of rye. You suspect that wasn't actually a joke. You dig for hours. Time melts into repetitive motion. Lift, toss, groan, wipe your brow, repeat. It's not glorious. It's not even remotely heroic. It's exhausting, thankless, and just as dangerous as fighting. One wrong step in a half-finished trench, and you'll twist an ankle, or worse. Someone near the far end of the trench collapses. Heat stroke, illness, no one knows. They're carried off on a makeshift stretcher made from a door and some rope. You keep digging. There's a scholarly debate over how much digging was done by soldiers versus hired laborers during sieges. Some argue that conscripted peasants bore the brunt of the work. Others believe soldiers often took turns when needed, especially during extended engagements. All you know is, you're doing it, and no peasant has volunteered to take your place. By midday, your arms feel like jelly wrapped in bruises. You sit on a pile of freshly moved dirt and stare at your blistered hands. Someone offers you a chunk of dried fruit. It's tough as leather, but it tastes faintly of something that might once have been a plum. You chew it slowly, savoring the moment of sweetness. A sudden shout breaks the stillness. Scouts return with news. Enemy reinforcements have been spotted in the distance, which means tomorrow won't be another day of digging. Tomorrow, you'll fight. You look at your half-finished trench. It's crooked, too shallow, lined with boot prints and half-hearted curses carved into the walls. But it'll have to do. You gather your gear and head back to camp, legs trembling with every step. Digging didn't spare you. It just bought you a little time. And now that time is up. The next morning comes too soon. You slept in your armor again. Your back is a single knot of pain, and your helmet smells like wet straw and regret. Breakfast is cold porridge, if you're lucky, and a chunk of something resembling hard cheese, but tasting like the concept of disappointment. The sky is a dull gray sheet, the kind of sky that doesn't so much hover above the earth as press down on it. Everything feels heavier, including your breath. There's a new tension in the air. No shouting, no laughter, no bitter jokes. Just the grim silence of men trying not to think too hard. Because today, it's real. The enemy has arrived, and they're not behind a wall this time. Mainstream historical fact: pitched battles in the medieval era weren't as common as you might think. Many conflicts were decided through sieges, small skirmishes, or sheer starvation. But when full-scale battles did happen, they were chaotic, brutal, and almost impossible to control. Line formations crumbled quickly. Victory often came down to timing, terrain, and dumb luck. You're lined up on a slight rise, shield in hand, sword strapped tight. The mud squelches under your boots. The man next to you is mumbling a prayer under his breath, over and over, like a lullaby with worse lyrics. The enemy banners ripple in the wind. Their line stretches wide, their armor glinting in the weak sun. Some of them ride horses, big muscled brutes with hooves that can turn a man into pudding. You don't look at the horses too long. A trumpet blares. Your captain yells. The line begins to move. You march forward in step, shoulder to shoulder with men you barely know. It's strangely quiet except for the rhythmic clank of metal and the distant sound of your own heartbeat trying to escape through your ears. Then the screaming starts, and the world goes sideways. The first clash is a thundercrack. Metal against metal, shield against shield. You're slammed from the side, stumble, regain your footing just in time to raise your sword, and block an axe you didn't see coming. Your arms shudder from the impact. Your shoulder blazes in pain. Quirky tidbit. Medieval swords weren't razor sharp like in the movies. Most were kept serviceably sharp, but their real strength was in their weight and force. A good swing could crush through mail or knock a foe senseless. But in a chaotic melee, finesse was rare. Most fighting resembled panic, not choreography. You swing back, wildly. You don't think, you don't aim, you just react. Time blurs. Your world becomes noise, flashes, pressure, heat. Someone falls beside you, screaming. You step over him. Another man shoves past. You duck, you jab, you trip. You barely notice the cut on your arm until the sleeve goes sticky. There's a scholarly debate about how much individual skill mattered in battles like this. Some argue that trained knights could make a difference. Others suggest that once the melee began, even the best swordsmen were just trying not to get trampled. It feels true now. You could be anyone. And that's the scariest part. At one point, you lose your sword. You don't even feel it leave your grip. 1 second it's there, the next it's gone. You grab a fallen man's spear and keep going. Hours pass, or maybe minutes, or days. You can't tell. Eventually, horns sound again, this time from your side. A signal to pull back, regroup, retreat, or maybe celebrate. You're too tired to care. You limp away from the field, bloodied and numb, stepping over bodies you try not to look at. Some groan, some don't move at all. Your ears ring, your fingers twitch, your vision swims in and out of focus. You sit, right where you are, in the mud, in the blood, in the middle of a world that just tried to kill you and nearly succeeded. And somehow, you're still here. The battle fades behind you now, like a thunderstorm rolling away over distant hills. The clatter of steel and the chaos of voices grow quiet, replaced by the soft hush of wind rustling through grass. You're no longer standing in mud or clutching a sword. You're resting now, sinking gently into the earth, the weight of the day slowly lifting from your shoulders. Your armor loosens, the ache in your limbs softens, even the sting of your wounds dulls to a whisper. The horizon stretches out in every direction, open, still, and calm. There are no banners here, no drums, no horns. Just quiet, just breath. The dirt is warm beneath your fingertips. The sky overhead shifts to soft twilight as stars begin to blink into view, one by one. It's peaceful here, slow, safe. You lie back. The battle is over, at least for now. You're tired, but a good kind of tired. The kind that invites sleep, not fear. Let your eyes close. Let your thoughts drift. You've made it through, and maybe, just maybe, in the quiet corners of the past, that's enough.